To see you. And good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. We have a fantastic Ingraham Angle for you tonight. We're going to explore the potentially criminal leaks coming out of the Mueller investigation and the latest bombshells from Donna Brazil about the revelations of corruption about Hillary Clinton and the DNC party apparatus. You're not going to want to miss it. Plus, as you can see, President Trump is expected at any moment to hold a joint press conference with President Xi in China. We're going to take you there live. But first, here's tonight's angle. Exactly 1 year ago, Donald Trump defied the odds to win the most surprising presidential victory, perhaps of all time. He busted through the so-called blue wall, winning 30 states compared to Hillary's paltry 20. In his victory speech, he promised this.
It's going to be a beautiful thing. Every single American will have the opportunity to realize his or her fullest potential. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
That's like 2:30 in the morning, as I recall. What a night. It was amazing. And a year ago, let's not forget, the experts were all proven wrong. For months and months, the pollsters, the consultants, and of course, the media told us that Trump had no chance. And even as the returns were coming in, and the news anchors were sitting there slack-jawed, or some of them weeping, they still clung to their narrative. But as we know, the people rose up. They were sick of the Washington machine taking their power away from them. So what did? They took it back. And ever since, that same political, media, and entertainment complex have been trying to regain their power. Last night, President Trump and his party suffered a series of losses. The Democrats netted wins in the governor's races in Virginia and in New Jersey, and even those citizens up in Maine, the maniacs, overwhelmingly voted in favor of an Obamacare program that expands Medicaid. The reaction on the left was understandably euphoric. And many began to declare that this meant the end of Trump and the end of his conservative populist movement.
It's hard to overstate the degree of toxicity that Trump represents right now on the basis of what we saw yesterday.
The election was, to some degree, a referendum on Trump, and obviously he did exceptionally badly.
It's a good night for Democrats, and I think a rejection to a degree of Trump, and perhaps even more than Trump, Trumpism.
What we showed was this party is maturing now under the weight of this Trump presidency.
Wishful thinking, boys. These are the same experts who have been writing Trump's political obituary since he and Melania came down the escalator in the Trump Tower in June 2015. These are the same talking heads who told us he'd never win the GOP primary. And by the way, if he did, he'd get creamed by Hillary in the general. And of course, if he did that, he would do lasting damage to the GOP. A year ago tonight, they were all over TV with their hangdog expressions, embarrassed and exposed. And now they feel like they've been vindicated because of an off-year election where the party in power usually loses? To put it in context, both Virginia and New Jersey, let's face it, are pretty much blue states. It was all but assured that the Democrats were going to win there. And even the president, let's not forget, he lost in those states. And let's not forget that before yesterday, the Democrats had lost every major special congressional election this year. Media didn't mention much of that last night. Republicans held on to seats this year in Georgia, South Carolina, Kansas, and Montana. And those Democratic losses came despite nonstop cheerleading from the mainstream media, as well as plenty of campaign cash. Still, let's be honest here. The Republicans and the president, they do have some lessons to take away from last night. I think they've gone about as far as they can go with the politics of anger. And they now need a happy electorate in 2018, one that sees its future brighter, and frankly, one that sees the country a little bit calmer. Remember what President-elect Trump told the nation a year ago in that victory speech.
I say it is time for us to come together as one united people. Time. I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans.
I love that. He has a lot of good news that needs to be shared with Americans, even those who did not support him. The economy is soaring. The stock market's at record levels. Consumer confidence is up. Unemployment is at a 17-year low, and I'm just getting started with that list. President Trump's efforts, think about it, to renegotiating NAFTA and other trade deals, those are bound to help American workers. And in case you didn't notice, he's a law and order president, deporting violent illegal aliens and cracking down on gangs like MS-13. That is good stuff for everybody here. The president and the GOP leadership, however, they must work together. They got to start racking up legislative victories that show voters, even those who usually don't vote for Republicans, that conservative populist policies are improving their lives and making the country happier. Remember the pursuit of happiness? Happy voters vote for the party in power. Angry voters vote the party in power out. That's what happened a year ago tonight. The Republicans do not want to see the tables reversed on them in 2018. And that's the angle. Joining us now for reaction here in Washington with me is Kellyanne Conway, counselor to President Trump and the first female campaign manager to manage her way into victory for a presidential candidate that no one thought could win. Happy anniversary, Kellyanne. Great to see you.
All of us, Laura.
What's going through your mind? I want to talk about Virginia in a moment, but I was just thinking about being at that Hilton Hotel a year ago and watching the big screens. I was on Fox earlier in the night, and I really wanted to be at the Hilton because I wanted to be with the people who supported the president. And seeing those screens up there and then the meter going up, 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 likelihood of President Trump to win. Take us back into the room where the president was that night.
It was historic and euphoric, as you know, and he came to the 14th floor of the Trump Tower where our war room was set up, and we had a data analytics war room set up on the 5th floor. But he came, and then his family started filing in one by one to watch the returns. The most guarded and least self-congratulatory person that entire night was Donald Trump. He had been a deal maker his whole life, and he knows the deal is not done until the final paperwork is signed. And so, but what we saw happening was, we saw that the New York Times, for example, their upshot was changing. I think they started out the day with like a 10 or 15% chance
4%.
he would win, 7% chance or something like Michigan, which he did win. And then it started to creep up and up and up, and then we started to get our own data in. We knew which counties were left. Anyway, I just want history to show that it was Donald Trump that connected with people. And he was able to take issues that were really very arcane to lots of folks, like trade and immigration, and convert them into top shelf issues that he's still fighting for now. He has a 70-point immigration plan as president. He's renegotiating these imbalanced, unfair trade deals so that they work more for the American worker. But he flipped counties that President Obama had carried twice. He flipped states that President Obama had carried twice. And those who still will not accept the election results, those who neither expected him to want to win or wanted him to win, I feel they've wasted a whole year in not getting to know why he won. The same reason he won has no expiration date just a year later. He won because he was able to make people feel that someone was giving voice and visibility to their everyday concerns, the forgotten man or forgotten woman, the people living paycheck to paycheck, the people who say, the system's always rigged against me. They have their nose pressed up against the glass looking in. And look, it's not like people yesterday in New Jersey and Virginia across the country said, we're not going to be a movement of hats saying, make America mediocre again. That's not happening. People still want their taxes cut. They want the border secured. They want prosperity. They're happy these regulations are rolled back. And I would say to even those Republicans who always seem to be critical and the naysayers, imagine who would be sitting in Neil Gorsuch's seat.
They were
right
willing.
now
they were
on the
willing to
Supreme
risk
Court.
that, Kellyanne. Though
They are.
Bill
They really are
Kristol,
still.
Bill Kristol, that whole Never Trump crowd. Some of them have turned around, but way too many are still sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, if only Evan McMullin." If only Evan McMullin could possibly do it.
Republican one that you see in Utah last night.
Joe Biden said this earlier today. He called it this phony nationalism. The reason why the world is compared to America is not just because of our exercise of our power, but it's the power of our example. It's because of who the hell we are. The message from him is we're not who we're supposed to be under Donald Trump.
Well, he's very bold now that it's revealed that Donna Brazile and others thought about swapping Hillary out and him in. But the fact is, even Joe Biden didn't have the courage to run for the third term of Obama-Biden, because he knows that, based on his own definition, that people looked up and saw an economy that wasn't even at 2% growth. We had for decades, Laura, before 2007, an economy that consistently had 3% or better.
But you got to put some points on the board.
Yeah,
more than
question.
the stuff that you guys have done, dereg,
Yes.
Keystone, the beginning of NAFTA renegotiation, and of course this tax reform they're trying to push through. Those are big things, but we still need happy voters. They were happy under Reagan. Voters were happy in the first few years of Bush. They just didn't like Bush that much sometimes, but they were happier. There's a lot of anger out there. And that Trump in that victory speech, I'm the president of all Americans, are we going to see him travel the country, those pockets that don't support Donald Trump?
Yes.
Are we going to see that more?
Yes, and he has gone to places that haven't necessarily supported him. But I want to say, Laura, that he put that in the speech up in the residence. The speech, the two versions of the speech had been sort of prepared, but he put that in there. Those were his words, and he ad-libbed after that, even those who didn't support me, and there were a few of you. And I have often hearkened back to that very passage in his speech, in his words, because he means it. And people are going to benefit from tax cuts who didn't support him. When I travel around this country and we're doing either drug demand or health care, I don't ask the people in the room who they voted for. When I went to a manufacturing plant recently in Roanoke, Virginia, I didn't say, please raise your hand if you voted for Donald Trump or if you voted. I don't much care. I want them all to benefit from it. But you're right about the optimism. That's the piece. And the happiness.
That hasn't clicked yet. I mean, consumer confidence is up, but the optimism about these conservative populist policies working.
People are nervous.
Happy
they waited
voters.
8 years to get Obamacare repealed and replaced because they were lied that they can keep their doctor in their plan. And there are 20-some million Americans who still don't have health care. But this president, he was called today the most pro-life president in modern American history, too. And I think people really don't fully appreciate what that means. This person who gave the most impassioned defense of life on a debate stage I've ever heard.
Why are his numbers so
against
low?
Hillary Clinton?
Why
Those are
his numbers
approval
so low?
ratings, though. I think that's actually become a look. I'm so old. I wrote a piece 18 years ago called "The Unbearable Lightness of Approval Ratings." So I talk about it when they're up or when they're down. I think that's become a quiz question, and people are angry about any number of things. So it's easy to say I disapprove of the system. It's why the media, the mainstream media's numbers are much lower than his.
Democrats are 22%.
Congress's numbers are much lower than him.
What about Gillespie, though, Kellyanne? You've known him for years.
Yes.
The only guy who campaigned with him, well, did fundraising for him, is George W. Bush. George W. Bush tried to, pull Jeb over the finish line in South Carolina. That didn't work. What does that tell you about Bushism and the old establishment party?
Well, look, he worked for the Bushes, and what I think it does say, though, is that candidates matter, campaigns matter, and we've all known Ed Gillespie for a long time. He's a great person. He would have served with great integrity as the governor of the Commonwealth. I think voters have to figure out what running in the age of Trump means. It means that you want to articulate lower taxes, fewer regulations, border security, which means the wall and other mechanisms so that we stop all the drugs and the illegal aliens from coming over the border. But it also means optimistic prosperity. And I think it means not being baited down every single rabbit hole the media wants you to do. But I think Ed...
There's also a New Jersey guy who is a lobbyist. I mean, how are you going to drain the swamp as a lobbyist New Jersey
Goldman
guy?
Sachs, I know.
That
But
doesn't work.
I would say, I think that, Ed's a good guy. We need public servants like that who want to run. At the same time, in 2009, so President Obama is elected in 2008. 2009 rolls around.
Christy McDonald.
We win Virginia and New
It
Jersey.
happens.
But now, 1 month later, what happened? Scott Brown, a Republican,
I
wins
remember.
10
I helped him with that.
Of course you did. But this is what happens sometimes. And I do think that there are dynamics at play in 2018 that go against the party and power Republicans, but they'll have a fundraising advantage. And people are not seeing much from the Democrats. Their message is what it was a year ago. The losing message a year ago is the message today. Trump's bad and we're not Trump, not a message.
Right. It's a resistance of anything. It's resistance. The numbers, and again, this is Virginia, which is essentially a blue state in many ways because of Northern Virginia. Women, minorities, those blocks went big for Democrats. Big for Democrats. Plus 65, white males, 40 to 55, 40 to 64 went for Gillespie. Got to broaden out that reach of the conservative populist message. Got to sell it.
It's true, and it's the message that matters because, for example, Donald Trump lost among women by about 12 points, 12 or 13 points to Hillary Clinton, the woman, the queen bee, but not by 20. And he had this message where he was consistent and he was convincing, and they saw strong leadership where he was giving voice to working men and working women, the job holders, not just the job creators and not just the job seekers, but the job holders, the vast majority of American households. And he had a message of patriotism, too. He says, look, I'm going to go around the world and deal with other leaders. He's on his 4th or 5th trip right now doing just that, Laura. But at the same time, he makes no apology that America is a sovereign nation that needs borders and makes its own decisions, and that his first and foremost goal is to keep us safe and prosperous here. And he expects other countries to think the same. That's
on the Mueller investigation, that's one thing he couldn't have predicted. I'm sure he knew it was going to be a rough sled with the media, as mad as they were, that they were exposed on election night. They were embarrassed and exposed.
But most of them are still out there.
But they're still, but it's not like nothing's changed. It's like Trump didn't even win. No. But they're clinging to that same narrative today. But nevertheless, I think Donald Trump didn't expect Mueller. He didn't expect the investigation mania. He didn't expect any of that. How distracting is that to him on a day-to-day basis? You're with him. You see him. The reports are he's obsessed with the investigation. He's obsessed with Jeff Sessions appointing a special counsel or stepping aside, recusing himself, I should say. Is he?
The only thing he's obsessed with is succeeding for the nation, and I see that firsthand every single day. He rarely talks about the investigation, and he has also said everybody will comply with it.
Bilateral meeting with President Xi Jinping in Beijing. Let's listen in.
Because I was traveling and you were so nice, and you said, we'll just do a quick dinner, and I think it had to last at least 2 hours, and we enjoyed every minute of it with your beautiful wife and Melania together. Their relationship is a great one, and our relationship has already proven to be a great one. Our meeting this morning in front of your representatives and my representatives was discussing North Korea, and I do believe there's a solution to that, as you do. Discussing trade with the United States, knowing that the United States really has to change its policies because they've gotten so far behind on trade with China and, frankly, with many other countries. And I have great respect for you for that, because you're representing China. But it's too bad that past administrations allowed it to get so far out of kilter. But we'll make it fair, and it'll be tremendous for both of us. My feeling toward you is an incredibly warm one. As we said, there's great chemistry. And I think we're going to do tremendous things for both China and for the United States. And it is a very, very great honor to be with you. Thank you very much. The hosting of the military parade this morning was magnificent, and the world was watching. I've already had people calling from all parts of the world. They were all watching. Nothing you can see is so beautiful. So I just want to thank you for the very warm welcome, and I look forward to many years of success and friendship, working together to solve not only our problems, but world problems and problems of great danger and security. I believe we can solve almost all of them, and probably all of them. Thank you very much for having us. Very much appreciated.
Bilateral press conference with President Trump and President Xi in Beijing, and a lot going on there, a lot to unpack. We'll be doing that later in the show. Pretty cozy there, relationship so far. And up next, why the future of the GOP depends on conservative populists, and how we may be seeing, finally, the death rattle of the GOP establishment. Corey Lewandowski and Ed Rollins join us. With President Trump in Asia, Vice President Mike Pence played the role of comforter-in-chief today, meeting with survivors of Sunday's horrific church massacre in Sutherland Springs, Texas. As we've been discussing in the last 2 nights on this show, faith and prayer in the tragedy's wake have been maligned by religious bigots. But in powerful remarks today, the vice president made sure to showcase the power that faith and prayer has here.
We are with you. The American people are with you. And as the president said on Sunday, halfway across the world, we will never leave your side. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted.
Vice President Pence met with the victims being treated at Brooke Army Medical Center while also receiving a briefing from law enforcement officials on the latest in the investigation. And this evening, he helped lead an amazing prayer vigil for the shooting victims and their families. Let's move on to the next story. Populism and the GOP. Republican Ed Gillespie flamed out in Virginia's governor's race last night, losing by nearly 9 points. The only president who had helped Gillespie was his old boss, George W. Bush. Did some fundraising there. Remember how helpful he was when his brother Jeb needed his help in South Carolina during that primary? Well, the lesson here is Bushism has no constituency in the GOP. And GOP candidates can't keep Trump at arm's length until the last minute and then expect him to energize the base. Not going to happen. It seems authentic, inauthentic that is, because it is. Joining us now for reaction are two people who know a lot about getting Republicans elected. From New York, Ed Rollins, who managed Ronald Reagan's historic, loved it, 1984 election, which won a whopping 49 states. Will that ever happen again? And here in Washington, Corey Lewandowski, President Trump's former campaign manager, good friend of the president's. Both of you join us now. Let's start with you, Corey. Happy anniversary. This is kind of a fun anniversary night. This is like old gang week here on the show. Gillespie goes down, of course, in New Jersey. No one expected Kim Guardino to win. But any lessons last night in this loss for Republicans? Do you agree with what my point is here?
I agree with you 100%. The lessons are very clear. You can't be a little bit pregnant. You can't decide you want to engage a little bit and then take it back and then say, you know what, I want the president's robocall, but I don't want him to come and campaign with me. What we know is that the American people, in an overwhelming fashion 1 year ago today, voted for fundamental and economic change be brought to Washington, D.C., and that's why Donald Trump won 30 states in the election against Hillary Clinton 1 year ago. And so you can embrace that and bring change, or you can remain in the status quo. We'll make change on the margins. And I think what happened in the video, and to a lesser extent in the race in D.C., was that candidates were focusing on the Trump agenda, which is bringing change to Washington.
But Ed, President Trump did not win in Virginia. I was with him that last night in Leesburg, Virginia, in the cold night where people waited 7 hours to see him. It was an unbelievable crowd, incredible energy, but he still couldn't win in Virginia a year ago tonight. So what lessons from last night's losses?
Well, first of all, we make too much of a deal out of New Jersey and Virginia in these offices because they're the first race after presidential election. New Jersey is now destroyed for the foreseeable future by Christie's inability to basically get himself out of his scandals. And Virginia is not our state anymore. It once was. One of the advantages I have of having been in politics 50 years, which is older than both of you together. And I think the bottom line here is that it's changed. It used to be a mixed state. It's now Northern Virginia dominates. 122,000 votes were carried, 222,000 votes were with the advantage in Northern Virginia, which was 20,000 less than the statewide margin. Those are where the bureaucrats, those are where the swamp, those are the people that Donald Trump's trying to change. The key thing here is Republicans are going to get some stuff done. You can't be for Trump's programs and not for Trump. I saw this with Ronald Reagan. I traveled around the country with Ronald Reagan campaigning for candidates. He endorsed every candidate that wanted his endorsement. That wasn't the key to success. The key to success was when a candidate said, elect me, I want to go to Washington, I want to support Ronald Reagan. Chick Heck was a perfect example. Had no chance whatsoever winning in Nevada. He said, send me to Washington. I'm going to vote every day with Paul Laxalt. I'm going to basically vote for Ronald Reagan, and he won. And my sense today is these Republicans are going to run out in many races across this country. Have got to say, the president's got an agenda. It's the same agenda we support.
Support the president.
Support the president. And if you do that, you'll build a base. And we're not a majority party. We're basically, we want a plurality. Corey ran a great campaign. Corey's a dear friend of mine. And I think to a certain extent, it was a brilliant campaign. And we won states we hadn't expected to win, and we hadn't won since 1984. We're still not a majority party. We got to go in the trenches. We got to win. We got to pass taxes. We got to fix the health care system. We got to do the things that Donald Trump promised, and we haven't done.
Ed, do you agree? I want both of you to chime in on this. We need happy voters. I know that sounds kind of simplistic, but we need people to be happy in 2018. If they're ticked off, pissed off, whatever you want to call it, that means the resistance is winning. We need people to see that conservative populist policies, renegotiating trade deals, cracking down on crime, simplifying taxes, cutting back the bureaucracy is going to make their lives better. And we need to do something on health care as well. Anyone disagree on that? We got a lot of unhappy Republicans in the grassroots. Corey, you take a stab at this.
You know this. The voters vote when the economy is good and they like the way the direction of the country is moving, then they vote in favor of keeping the position of the party in power. And what you have is when Washington doesn't deliver, which they have not delivered for 30 years, people vote for change. And so if this administration, working with Congress, doesn't get tax cuts done, they don't build the wall, which they've pledged to do, they don't get repeal and replace done, then the voters are going to be angry in 2018 and 2020. And what we'll see is a revolution moving to the other side because the Republican Party did not deliver on the promises that they were supposed to.
I want you both to listen to this. This was Lindsey Graham, sometimes not a friend of the president, but other times he seems like he is a kind of a team player on some issues. This is what he said today.
Our problem is our base is pretty unenthusiastic. We've done some things with Gorsuch and regulatory reform, but legislatively, we haven't cut taxes and we haven't reformed health care, and I think that showed up last night.
Ed, your reaction there. I mean, Lindsey and I don't agree on everything. I think he's exactly right on this.
Well, he couldn't be more right. You know, equally as important, we can't be a party of haters. We have to be a party of fighters. We have to fight and sell our program. You talked earlier about why can't we communicate. We can't communicate because everything gets in the way. If you're going to sell taxes, the president has to go out as the big messenger, tell the people why it's going to be better for them. Yes. And he can do that. I mean, every week we have a different distraction. Every week we basically, and it's not just the tweets, it's everything else. The administration has to decide these are the president's programs. This is what the House is going to sell. This is what the Senate's going to sell. And we still don't know what those things are. We still don't know what the tax plans are. Make it clear, make it simple.
Well, it's raising taxes on some people like me. I mean, it's raising taxes on some people. I mean, that's why it's going to take some time. Well, before we let you go, the State Department is filled with swamp monsters. They want to take power back from Donald Trump, and they want to thwart his agenda. He has a major personnel problem on his hands, because I hear from people who are meeting with foreign leaders. Foreign leaders are more supportive of the president's agenda in some cases than the people at the State Department they're meeting with. That's a problem, and the president does not want to admit that.
Laura,
he and I are going back and forth on that.
We saw a story just last week that U.S. embassies overseas have refused to put up the president's picture because they haven't been supporting him. That's astonishing to me that the president of the United States' picture is not hanging in every U.S. embassy overseas. Look, there's 4,152 presidential appointments that he has the right to go and make. Go make them and get the bureaucrats out, get the people who are against your agenda out.
That's on him.
It's on the entire administration. Yeah. It was on the transition team that they weren't prepared on day one. It's on the administration that they didn't fill those jobs, and it continues to be on the team right now that they don't have the loyal Trump people in place to move his agenda forward.
That's a huge problem. Ed and Corey, it's great to see you. Big night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And coming up, we're moments away from a major press conference between President Trump and China's Xi Jinping in Beijing. A lot's at stake for the president on trade, North Korea, a lot. We're going to have a preview in just a moment. Press statements with China's President Xi, and as we told you last night, holding China accountable for their rampant cheating on issues related to trade. That was a key tenet of Trump's successful win. Fox News chief, White House correspondent John Roberts, traveling with the president, and he joins us now. John.
Laura, good morning from China. And you saw the president and Xi Jinping there just a short time ago at the beginning of that expanded bilateral meeting, both giving each other platitudes. Xi Jinping saying that the U.S.-China relationship is a very important one, not only to both nations, but to the world as well. And when you have the world's two biggest economies and the number one and the number three military in the room at the same time, yeah, you bet that the relationship is important. President Trump suggesting, by the way, Xi Jinping did not mention North Korea. President Trump did, saying that they had a restricted bilateral meeting this morning, much smaller group, the president and a few very close advisors, saying, I believe, as you do, that there is a solution to North Korea. We're just not sure at what point that solution becomes apparent to the rest of the world, because at the moment there doesn't seem to be any kind of a solution. And the president again saying that the United States lags well behind China when it comes to the U.S.-China trading relationship. There's a $347 billion trade deficit that the U.S. has with this nation, and the president would like to shrink that, if not erase it altogether. Laura?
John, thanks so much. And joining us now with reaction from Fresno, California, Victor Davis Hanson. He's a National Review Institute fellow and author of the new book, The Second World Wars: How the First Global Conflict Was Fought and Won. VDH, great to see you. There is a lot to unpack in this visit. The president with Xi, I mean, to watch the two of them together, it seems like a modern-day love story. I mean, you got all the dramatic background, you got the Forbidden City, you got the pageantry. I mean, they want to outdo us on the pageantry side in China. Boy, what a stark contrast, Victor, from what we heard from President Trump on the campaign trail in 2016.
Well, he did mention trade right in front of the Chinese, and trade to the Chinese is what North Korea is to the Chinese. They know what they're doing. They know that North Korea was a problem for us. They know that it ties down our attention. They cut their leash of their bulldog every once in a while, and they act as if they don't know where it's going or who it's barking at. And the same thing with trade. They cheat on patents. They cheat on copyrights. They cheat on financial accords. And then they think, well, 50 billion one year, then 100, 150, 250, 350. And we have people in America say, well, it makes goods cheaper for the middle class. It makes us more competitive. We've heard all that, and we've heard all that about North Korea. Now to quote the infamous Reverend Wright, these chickens are coming home to roost. And Trump is going to have to find leverage with China and hold them accountable for North Korea. But he cannot give in or appease them on trade, because that's a central nexus of his domestic political support.
All right, Victor, that's our leverage.
Well, it is. It's one of our. I don't think it's all, but I don't think it's all of our leverage. We need to develop a closer tie with Russia. India has a lot of geographical border disputes with China. People like in the Philippines and Vietnam do not like what they're doing in the Spratly Islands.
Japan,
Taiwan, South Korea, Japan. They're all considering nuclear weapons. The next round of, God forbid, a proliferation will not be favorable to China. It would be favorable to us. So there's a lot of Chinese members in universities, citizens of the party members that buy property. We have a lot of sticks that we can employ without getting into trade. We don't want to compromise on our toughness on trade.
Victor, I want to show you, this is a photo, our viewers. This is what China unveiled in the last 24 hours, a picture of something called the Magic Island Dredger. It's a maritime vessel. Kind of looks hard to see, but it's a giant vessel that makes it easier for China to build those man-made islands and reclaiming, what are they trying to reclaim there, Victor, in the South China Seas? This disputed territory where they can build islands that they can then use to stage military exercises from. And they announced that. They also announced, they announced it before, but now you see more of this military jet, a new supersonic jet. There's a picture. And so they push these images out to remind people of China's on the rise. China 2025, we talked about this last night. They want to seek to dominate every major heavy manufacturing, software engineering, biotech, all of it. But this is a message to the world.
It is. It's especially a message to the immediate region. And they're saying the United States is a spent power. The West is in decline. The United States in particular is in recession. And you better make a deal with us. And they're just following the copybook perfectly of the Japanese in the 1930s and their so-called Greater Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. And we need to go in and say, you know what? You're cheated, just as you cheated on these bases and you created these artificial islands, that same attitude is what you did with North Korea when you empowered them to get a bomb. And the 30 years of appeasement are over. And we have a lot of pressure that we have never discussed with you. And we don't want a war. We don't want increased, extraneous tensions. But you're going to see a new attitude. The United States is not in recession. And this is an ethical and moral issue. I really applaud Trump, because when he talked about the two Koreas, he was the first American president to say on one side people are dying, death, destruction. On the other side, this is a humane society that doesn't send off missiles at its neighbors. South Korea gave us Kia, they gave us Samsung. And when that war ended in World War II, the North got the industrial developed region that the Japanese colonialists had left them. And they have half the population, they have a greater area, and they destroyed that entire northern peninsula. And the South played by the rules, just like people in the Pacific play by the rules. China and North Korea don't. And we need to remind people this is an ethical, moral issue of people who deliberately cheat on international accords, and they bully their neighbors, and they cause havoc throughout the region. They do so because they assume that either we can't or won't stop it, and the West is in decline. And I think we really need to tell the world, come on, you guys, we've got to galvanize and remind them what
communist
we
country,
can't do.
Victor. It is a communist country with a state-run. No, yes. I mean, to listen to Goldman Sachs with their $5 billion announcement of the new sovereign wealth fund they're doing. All these big companies Wilbur Ross is announcing big deals. You know, you got DuPont, you got GE, Boeing, big deals in China. So there might be some good that comes of that for sure. But this is a communist country. And every time you hear, every time they just say something, every time you hear from Trump, well, we got to do better on trade, we got to have fairer trade. The Wall Street Journal and all these never-Trumper globalists are out there saying, oh, Laura, you people or Trump or Victor Davis Hanson, you all want a trade war, and you wake up because this is the global world.
You know, we need to say that the people in Youngstown, Ohio, and the people in Flint, Michigan, and the people in Fresno, California played by the rules. And they're good, decent people. They work, and China did not. Just like they didn't play by the rules on trade, just like they didn't play by the rules with North Korea. And they know what they're doing, and they're sort of like the proverbial scorpion that bites a frog. That's what communist countries do. They cheat because they're not transparent and they're amoral societies. It doesn't mean we have to go to war or demonize them, but we have to think imaginatively of all sorts of pressures and sticks we can apply to the Chinese. And I don't really quite understand. They run a $350 billion deficit, and they created a nuclear North Korea that has a thermonuclear tipped missile that may threaten Oregon or San Diego, and yet millions of these students of party members or at American universities, they buy property as if it's perfectly okay. Globalized economy, we're all friends. I don't think so. I think it's time to bring an ethical argument. And I applaud Trump. For the first time, I heard him say something to a Chinese president in public about trade, and for the first time, he described the Korean crisis in terms of a failed, amoral North and a humane South that played by the rules and is democratic and transparent. We haven't heard that yet.
By the way, we're out of time, but I got to remind everyone this. A new study just came out, and this is what Victor's written about. The cost of wars in the Middle East and in Asia since 2001, this is what the United States has spent. $5.6 trillion, Victor. The Pentagon had said it was going to cost $1.5 trillion. $5.6 trillion. How much has China spent in getting involved in military conflicts? How much?
Hardly anything, and yet China is promoting autocracy. So I don't know
Victor,
what to tell you, but
well, that's a lot of money. We've got $5.6 trillion out the window. They've spent almost nothing, and we've got this $360 billion trade deficit this year. VDH, thank you so much, Victor Davis Hanson, great historian, great writer, great having you on. And up next, the leaks are flowing out of Bob Mueller's Russia probe. Is the special counsel playing swamp politics with the investigation? Judge Napolitano is here next. Welcome back. Leaks continue to flow. Big shocker out of Bob Mueller's Russia investigation. First, there was a leak to CNN late last month about a grand jury approving charges 72 hours before the information went public. And secondly, just this week, a new leak to NBC News claims that Mueller has enough evidence to bring charges against former NSC advisor Mike Flynn and his son. New York Post editorial board says that leaking, quote, raises the suspicion that the special counsel may be playing politics with his prosecutions. If the leaks did emanate from Mueller's office or the grand jury itself, it would be a criminal violation. And if Mueller's upset about the violations, he hasn't said anything about it publicly. Joining us now for reaction, the guy who gave me my first job out of college.
Oh, you're dating me.
Okay, Andy hired me. I'm sorry, but this is late night TV. You gave me my first job out of college, Princeton University, all those years ago.
As if it were yesterday.
Yeah,
and I have loved you ever since.
Yeah, well, Andy, you created a monster, okay?
Tell me about it.
Total monster. Okay, well, these leaks are a nightmare, okay? I mean, I was a criminal defense attorney in my day. You can't do this. What's going on?
I am not concerned about the leak of the existence of the indictments of Manafort and Gates 3 days beforehand. That could have happened anyway. But the strategically planted leak, not that there is an indictment, but that we have enough information, enough evidence to indict, is a classic federal prosecutor technique to send the lawyers of the targets, General Flynn and his son, running into their offices.
Panic.
We got to negotiate. We got to
Well,
negotiate.
we got help. We got
what
help.
do you have? What do you have?
Yeah. What can we? How can we sell out Trump or whatever it is?
Is it wrong for them to leak? Of course it is. Is it criminal for them to leak? If they leak that which is in front of the grand jury, yes. Do they do it all the time? All the time. And do they get away with it? Yes, they get away with it.
It's for pressure. They want to put them in a vice grip, twist the vice, and see if they can get them any information.
The whole case is about pressure. If I may, it's about bribing and threatening. It's about, we can do this for you, and if you don't cooperate, we'll do this to you.
I mean, Trump said this, and it was a little over the top. But he said, our system basically screwed up. I mean, this prosecutors have an enormous amount of discretion. I've seen what people like Patrick Fitzgerald did to Conrad Black. That was an outrage what he did. Patrick Fitzgerald, to Scooter Libby. These things, they're out of control, the prosecutors.
Our colleague Judith Miller spent 85 days in jail for refusing to tell the federal government something they already knew. Look, judges have this attitude. If there's merit to the case, I'm not going to throw the case out, no matter how bad the prosecutors behave. And the Justice Department will never prosecute one of its own. The worst that happens to them is some sort of an ethical proceeding against them, and then they're back trying cases 6 months later.
No, I find it appalling. And this investigation is this circular maze of pressure against people. We got to move on to other, because there's other stuff happening. Dying to get your take. State Department. There's a piece that came out this week about how some of the State Department employees are feeling very uncomfortable because Rex Tillerson is trying to move along these requests for transparent release of information.
Okay, so
diplomats are fearing Tillerson transparency pushes linked to Clinton's emails.
Okay,
what's that about?
There are many Freedom of Information Act lawsuits still being brought against the State Department for the revelation of Mrs. Clinton's emails that we still haven't seen. Until last week, the same lawyers from the Justice Department were making the same arguments now as they were making in the Obama years. Last week, Rex Tillerson changed that 180 degrees, and he said, you know what? We're vetting these things. I've assigned 100 people to vet them. You're going to get them. And the people that she emailed with are terrified as to what might come out.
Well, isn't transparency what I think people in both parties, they always say they want transparency. We want to know what our government is doing, when it's not going to sacrifice national security, but we want to know more. You're a libertarian, Andy, and this is where I'm with the libertarians.
We have a right to know.
Power to the people. The people employ these bureaucrats in Washington. They answer to us. We're not their slaves. They work for us.
Here's the interesting question. Why is Rex Tillerson changing his mind now? I'm happy that he has, but something's motivating him.
Yeah, what do you think? It is
I don't know,
security?
but this is more yes.
Job security?
This is more your bailiwick than mine. I'm happy that the Constitution's complied with. You want to know why is he starting to comply with it now?
What about the CNN deal with Time Warner?
You know, the news reports this morning were if AT&T wants to merge with Time Warner has to sell CNN. The Justice Department has denied it, and CNN has denied it. Let's face it, no judge in the country is going to make them sell CNN.
Judge Napolitano.
Yes, Laura
Thank
Ingraham.
you for hiring me.
Thank you for having
my first job.
Thank you for having me here tonight.
We could have predicted this back in '86. All right, we're going to blow this break.
Was it that long ago?
Now, be quiet. When we come back, last night's epic political upset that you probably didn't hear about, and it's good news. Stay with us. Finally this evening, a new segment we're calling Missed America, where we salute average Americans who are making a difference in this country and in our communities. Tonight, the unlikely story of Vito Perillo. Mr. Perillo is a 93-year-old World War II veteran, and yesterday he pulled off arguably the biggest election upset, perhaps in the country. The Tinton Falls, New Jersey resident knocked on every door in town. He wore through 2 pairs of shoes, and he wanted to let voters know he wanted to be their mayor. Well, last night, he beat the incumbent, Gerald Turning, in a stunning victory. The Navy vet won 53% of the vote, running on a taxpayers first platform. So a huge congratulations to the new mayor-elect on his victory. We're in awe of your service and your willingness at age 93 to continue to fight for the country that you love. And that's all the time we have tonight. Shannon Bream and the Fox News at Night team are up next. Make sure to buy that copy of Billionaire at the Barricades, Populist Revolution from Reagan to Trump. It'll explain the Gillespie loss. We await the president's joint statement from China with President Xi. Good night from Washington.